This is Cindy from Cindy's Library, and as you can see, I am wearing my fireworks shirt, which means it is the 4th of July weekend, which means it is time to do my final wrap-up for June. So what did I read in the second half of June? Frankly, not that much. But I did finish Ancient Athon, sort of. I'll explain. So, first of all, and the one that needs some explanation, is The Pillow Book by Sei Shonagon. And no, I am not quite done with it, or even really overly close to being done. Although I am 118 pages into it, and even taking out the extremely extensive notes at the end. These are all notes of various sorts. Yep, that still leaves this much roughly left. But I am not displeased by how much I read of this. Roughly half, maybe a little less than half. But the reason for this is because the Pillow Book, which I did not realize at the beginning, it's not a journal, but in many ways it is like a journal. You think there are many things like this. Forests, and then she lists 4 different forests. Plains, 1, 2, 3, 4 different plains. And winter is best when it's fearfully cold, while the summer is most summer-like when it's impossibly hot. So a lot of things like that. Also a lot of things where she relates little snippets of life in the court of the Empress. And so, very interesting, not some type of thing you can read straight through, though. So, I am not touching this during Jane Austen July, but I am planning on coming back to this in August. And we'll see if I can't finish this then. But since I read good half of it, I am very pleased with that, considering. Oh. The next one is The Age of Bede. And in this one, we have 5 different selections. Let's see. Here we go. We have Bede, Life of Cuthbert. These are all basically saints' lives. So Bede, Life of Cuthbert. This one is less political. I mean, there's a little bit, kind of hard to avoid that, considering at the time how involved religious orders could be with politics for various reasons, but that is not the focus of Bede, Life of Cuthbert. What the focus is on are miracles. It seems like every time Cuthbert turns around, someone is getting healed or something else miraculous happens. So kind of interesting. Next we have Edia Stephanus, must be his Latin name, but this is Life of Wilfrid. Wilfrid and Cuthbert seem to have overlapped a little bit, but unlike the Life of Cuthbert, you get a couple miracles, but so many politics, all the politics, and 4, 5 journeys to Rome. And yeah, there were some issues that Wilfrid encountered, and so he had a lot of political support and a lot of political opposition. Lots of details about that in this book. Oh, the next one is Lives of the Abbots of Wearmouth and Jarrow, again by Bede. And this tells about the founding of the two monasteries at Wearmouth and Jarrow and their first abbots. The fourth item is the anonymous history of Abbot Ceolfrith. And Ceolfrith is the final abbot talked about also in the Lives of the Abbots of Wearmouth and Jarrow. And so a fair amount of overlap there, although a different author, and so interesting in that way to see the different perspectives they bring to many of the same materials. Finally, the last item in here is the Voyage of St. Brendan, which I was particularly excited for because Tolkien was interested in St. Brendan and even wrote a poem about St. Brendan's voyage. But it's wrong to say I was disappointed per se, but based on Tolkien's poem Eramin, I got what I was not expecting from the Voyage of St. Brendan here. This Voyage of St. Brendan is all about miracles and stopping at certain islands at certain feasts of the liturgical year and marvels of spiritual nature, shall we say. In fact, they even go to one area full, well, not do they actually go to the land of demons, but they do encounter, I think it's Judas Iscariot, and a rock in the middle of the ocean, and he's rather being tortured there, but it's better than being tortured by the demons, and he suggests that that Saint Brendan and his companions leave him, but they don't, since Brendan promised him a short period of reprieve from his regular punishment, so he stays to fulfill that. So very interesting, not at all like Tolkien's poem, except for the fact that, of course, fantastic voyages, but in Tolkien's poem, it is all about encounters with fairy, not with the divine or the opposite. So, interesting. I'm glad I read this. Never read any Saints' Lives before, but interesting. I can see how they could be interesting, especially to people who are into that type of thing. So, I also finished Sir Gawain and the Green Knight, and this edition also includes Pearl and Sir Orfeo. And we are going to give a full review of this, and I'll try to remember to include that in this video when I get it up. That'll probably be my next video, but greatly enjoyed it. Again, wonderful stories. Lots to say about these for the next Tolkien Talk. So that leaves Macbeth and Pilgrim's Progress. Macbeth, the Scottish play by William Shakespeare, and uh, Pilgrim's Progress by Paul Bunyan. So, first, the Scottish play. I'd never read Macbeth before. Somehow I got through school without doing that. And of course, I came across numerous common phrases that seem to have been coined by Shakespeare. Can't remember any off the top of my head, but yep, just things in common use that you would recognize. Shakespeare, he permeates so much of the English language just with the way he put things. Amazing that way. Anyway, as for the story itself, now I understand about the three witches. Now I understand what the Weird Sisters means. It was very interesting. If Macbeth had never had that prophecy made to him, and if he had never told about it to his wife, although as a good husband, of course, he should, but especially at the beginning, Lady Macbeth is way more bloodthirsty than her husband. Not a good thing. And of course, that is what leads to the death of the old King Duncan. Oh, one thing I was not expecting was how bloodthirsty Lady Macbeth was, and then how all her crimes ended up basically driving her mad and she committed suicide. So, yep, definitely counts as a tragedy, and I can see why the Scottish play is considered one of Shakespeare's best tragedies. You could argue about which one is actually the best, but Macbeth is definitely up there. Very interesting characters. So I am very glad that I have read it now. It's supposed to be a historical play, and if you look at Scottish history, you will indeed find King Duncan, you'll find Macbeth listed, Malcolm, Macduff, you may very well find them listed. Can't remember exactly how prominent they were, but this is definitely a very anti-Macbeth play, which I find interesting since it takes place far enough back that it didn't necessarily have to be. And I'm not saying that everything that Macbeth did wasn't terrible, it was, but well, kind of calling the pot calling the kettle black because a lot of Scottish kings acted like that, from what little I know of Scottish history. So, speaking of which, one of these days I have to hit Scottish history. One of these years. But in the meantime, I've got Macbeth done. Yay! And as a side note, I'm not, well, I will be participating in Shakespeare's September as far as reading a Shakespeare play or two that I have not read yet. I'm not planning on doing anything more than that, but I do want to get a couple more read, so that will be great. Which leaves Pilgrim's Progress by Paul Bunyan. You know, I grew up with Little Women. I got it, I think, for my 12th birthday. I have 3 sisters, so you can see where this is going. Yes, we played Little Women growing up because, well, there are 4 sisters, so what are you supposed to do? And of course, in Little Women, they mention Pilgrim's Progress a fair amount. And I am so glad that I read Pilgrim's Progress finally because now I get it. I'd have to agree with Joe. Uh, Chris, well, I should say first, Pilgrim's Progress is divided into 2 parts. You start with the pilgrim Christian, leaving the city of destruction for the heavenly city. And we go through his journey in the first half. And yes, we go to Vanity Fair, we meet Apollyon. There's the Valley of Humiliation, several other references in Little Women. So now I get all the references. But I'd have to agree with Joe. That half is a bit more interesting than the second half, which follows Christian's wife Christiana and their children, their 4 sons, and Christiana's friend Mercy. So, not quite as interesting, and it's not that Bunyan didn't put theological essays basically in the first half. They seem to have multiplied, though, in the second half. That or there just seems to be more because what happens in between the theological essays isn't nearly as interesting. Although for the second half, I will say the character of Greatheart is a great character. I love knowing where he comes from now too. Although it is kind of you wish that Christiana was a bit more proactive. I know she has the children, and I'm not saying it's not great that Greatheart is quite willing to help her along the way, but it'd be nice if she was a bit more proactive. But not surprising considering the time period it was written in. I've heard that Pilgrim's Progress is the allegory for Protestants. Milton's Paradise Lost, of course, is the one for Catholics. Haven't read Paradise Lost yet. Yes, it is on my list. Someday, someday. So, finished all of that in the second half of the month. Didn't really push myself beyond that very much. It was a fair amount to keep up with, especially since I got such a late start, since I read all of the High King series. Well, read and listened to all of the High King series, and read the first 4 of the 6 Crestomancy books in the first half of the month. So, I'm pretty pleased with what I was able to accomplish. I was able to get some things crossed off my list, which is wonderful. And so, I would say overall June was a good-ish reading month. Oh, and there is one other thing that I finished, because Craftlit had been doing Northanger Abbey by Jane Austen, and we finished in at the towards the end of June, basically. Now, what is Craftlit, you might ask? It is a podcast run by Heather Odover, and basically she uh, gives us audio versions of classics because they are in the public domain. And if your hands are too busy to pick up a book, at least you can listen to one. So, Northanger Abbey was our last one. Very, very fun. I'll put a link to her site, and I'll put a link to my Northanger Abbey review, which I did earlier last year. And yeah, that's what I finished for June. So, love to hear how your June reading went. If you participated in Ancients-a-thon, I'd love to hear how you came out with that too. Any comments, suggestions? Sorry, I just moved my table. But any comments, suggestions, feel free to leave them, and I hope we all stay safe and healthy. And as always, happy reading!